guess we start. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us today in what promises to be a very interesting event on oil and gas development on Guyana. As you probably know, there have been some very significant oil discoveries offshore in Guyana that are being developed, and as soon as next year we'll have some production going on for the first time. And the prospects are very significant. Reserves of more than 5 billion barrels of oil, probably much higher than that. And if production goes to the levels that are projected now, Guyana would become the country with the highest per capita oil production in the world. Higher than Kuwait, which is the current country with the highest per capita. Of course, that has to do partly with the size of the population of Guyana, but that tells you a lot about a country that currently is not wealthy, could become significantly wealthy. And of course, for that to happen, at least two things have to happen. One, the oil has to be developed. They did already the first part, which is finding it, which is pretty important, and geological risks were significant. There were plenty of dry wells before, but now the size and the quality of the oil has been assessed as a very important oil basin and province. In addition to that, of course, we need the oil to be extracted, and that requires the right institutional framework to proceed, the right political environment, the right policies, so that the full development of the resource actually happens. You don't need to be reminded that next door, Venezuela has one of the largest oil resources in the world, and production has been collapsing. In fact, if things continue the way they are, Guyana will produce more oil than Venezuela in a few years, which it's pretty amazing if you consider that Guyana until this year was not producing any oil. And then, of course, there are the issues of development. As you have probably heard, there is all this idea about the resource curse, about that some oil countries actually do not transform their natural resource richness or wealth into development, or at least not as much as you would expect. I myself, I studied that issue, and I am not that pessimistic. I think even the basket cases of that we talked about usually do better than without discovering any oil, but that's another discussion. But having said that, the challenges are tremendous, and for a small country, they are particularly difficult to tackle. So we had just a meeting with the delegation from the government, and I'm very well impressed by how they are thinking about these issues. So I'm hopeful that they will be successful. But this is what we're going to be discussing today. So we're going to have first, our keynote speaker will be the Honorable Dominic Gaskin, who is the Minister of Business of Guyana. You have his bio in the program. After that, we'll have a panel in which it will include the Commissioner of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, Mr. Newell Denison. Then we'll have Mr. Sean Herrera, Director of Schlumberger for the Caribbean. Jamie McInerney, Jamie, the Senior Director of FTI Consulting. And we will also have the Honorable David Patterson, the Minister of Public Infrastructure in Guyana. So I will moderate that panel. And then we will have questions from the audience. So please, let's welcome Minister Askin. You can change here the slides.
No, I have no slides.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Monaldi. I'm a bit overwhelmed. This is an excellent turnout. So I want to thank you all for coming here today. And I particularly want to thank the organizers for inviting us here today to share with you our experiences and our vision for Guyana. I've been asked to speak on oil and gas development in Guyana, and not from a technical point of view, but from the perspective of Guyana as a preferred investment destination. I'm sure you're all aware that Guyana is a small country on the northeastern coast of South America, with a small population and a whole lot of oil. And that until the discovery of that oil in 2015, we were arguably one of the most ignored countries in the world. Guyana is now receiving more attention than ever before, especially from businesses interested in what is taking place on Guyana's offshore petroleum blocks. And I believe that this is a good thing for Guyana. So first, I want to fill in a few blanks about our country, and then get back to why the discovery of oil should be good for Guyana, and how all this oil can become a good thing for Guyana. And of course, the role of the investor in making this happen. So we call ourselves Guyanese. You're Americans, we are Guyanese. We're the only English-speaking country in South America, and we share a culture with the Anglo-Caribbean or Commonwealth Caribbean islands of the West Indies. But we like to think with an additional flavor as a result of our mix of indigenous, African, East Indian, Chinese, and Portuguese populations. Politics in Guyana has been dominated for over half a century by two main political parties, supported by the two largest ethnicities respectively, African and East Indian. And this, coupled with our system of winner-takes-all governance, has resulted in some amount of ethnic insecurity, where the ethnic group associated with the party that is not in government feels that is being neglected or marginalized by the party that is in government. So we live with this constant anxiety. And I'd like to think that this is improving with each successive election, because our indigenous and mixed-race populations are growing as a percentage of the whole. And this now makes it imperative for any political party seeking election to appeal to more than a single ethnic group. Free and fair elections are held in Guyana every 5 years, or earlier if certain constitutional triggers are activated. The last election in 2015 was an early election, and it looks likely that we will be going into another early election sometime this year. The current government, of which I am a part, is a multi-party coalition government. We are committed to the social, economic, political, and institutional development of our country through good governance and the sustainable and responsible management of our vast natural resources. On the economic side, Guyana has always been a commodities exporter, and we still rely on exports of gold, bauxite, rice, sugar, and seafood for the bulk of our export earnings. Our bureaucracy is a work in progress, and our government has embarked on an ambitious program of digitization and automation as a means of drastically reducing inefficiencies in its various processes and creating a more friendly business environment. So it is against this concise but unvarnished backdrop that I'd like to say a little about Guyana's future as an oil and gas producer and as a preferred destination for investment. As a government, we see the recent discoveries of oil as a means of transforming our economy and fast-tracking development. So we have an expectation of a more productive and better compensated workforce, an accelerated rollout of our infrastructure development for the transportation, energy, and telecommunication sectors, and the more effective delivery of government services, especially in the areas of education and youth development. We see oil exploration and production as activities that are best conducted in the spirit of a long-term partnership between the country and the contractor. We see the government as a facilitator of such a partnership through a well-regulated industry. While we recognize that there is a lot that our country can gain from this sudden exposure to international oil companies, we recognize also that there is a lot that we can lose if we do not manage this sector responsibly. Our world is rife with examples of bad deals and bad experiences in countries where international oil companies have invested and extracted heavily and somehow not given back enough to change people's lives for the better. As an oil producer, Guyana has arrived on the scene quite late and with an obvious lack of experience in doing business in the big league. While this may be a disadvantage, we are also fortunate to be starting out at a time when there's a wealth of information available on every aspect of the oil and gas sector and its impact on various economies at different stages of their development. So we have had a chance to see some of the mistakes that other countries have made after discovering oil, and also to see some of the negative consequences of rapid economic growth from the production of oil in countries that may not have made any major mistakes other than to have failed to anticipate the magnitude of the impact of oil production on their economies. Our government's position from day one has been that Guyana should follow a green development pathway, strengthen its agricultural, agro-processing, mining, and forestry industries, and develop its tourism and services sectors. These are the priority economic sectors in which we are seeking investments, and we are promoting the comparative advantage that our country offers in each of these areas. I specifically did not mention the oil and gas sector as a priority sector, not because it's not important, but because this sector has already generated tons of interest. And the truth is, we don't have to promote it because it promotes itself. However, what we are saying to the oil and gas sector is that we want to partner with reputable international companies. And we want an arrangement that benefits our country in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. There has been a recent buzz about local content in Guyana, and we now know that Guyanese people feel strongly about local content and expect to be the main beneficiaries of our country's valuable natural resources, which rightfully belong to them. Our government has to manage these expectations and manage this new sector in a way that brings about a win-win partnership between the investors and the people of our country. We know that this is possible. We also know that it is difficult to achieve without the right partners and without good governance at our end. Our government is in the process of finalizing its local content policy for the sector, And we are looking at three key areas: employment and workforce development, supplier opportunities and business development, and the transfer of knowledge and technology. We believe that there is mutual interest in these three areas between international oil companies and our government. Why would any company not want to employ local workers and source supplies from local companies once there's existing capacity? And why would any company not want to contribute to building local capacity where it doesn't exist when this can serve its needs? And why would any company in this day and age want to operate for 3 decades or more in a foreign country and not leave behind a legacy that it can be proud of? And of course, why would any government not want to ensure that its depleting natural wealth is replaced with sustainable human capital and a globally competitive economy? These are rhetorical questions, but I am suggesting here that given the small size of our population, 750,000 people, and the scale of the discovery so far, that this has all the ingredients of a success story for both our country and the industry. Guyana has the second highest percentage of forest cover of any country in the world. This has a value. We have managed over the last few decades to maintain a very low rate of deforestation while still being able to sustain a logging industry. We have an abundance of fresh water and 200-odd scattered indigenous communities whose residents are interested in developing the tourism potential that exists in their unspoiled natural habitats. Private expertise and resources are required to develop, market, and manage community-owned and led nature-based tourism products in these areas. And it is easier to sell a destination to private investors if that destination is already familiar for the right reasons. And the same holds true for investments in our mining, agriculture, and forestry sectors. We want Guyana to be seen as a clean, green, sustainable, and secure investment destination. And that image is going to depend heavily on the tone that we set in the early days as an oil producer. So when we speak of Guyana becoming a preferred investment destination, we are speaking of a destination that delivers profits to investors in the context of a sustainable partnership with our country. We are not seeking to become the new Singapore or the new Norway. We want a new Guyana, a better Guyana, a Guyana that is relevant to the Guyanese people, and a Guyana in which young Guyanese can see a bright future that they want to be part of. Guyana has not produced a drop of oil as yet, but I'm encouraged by a lot of what I have seen happening over the last 3 years. I've seen persons being trained. I've seen businesses learning more about procurement in oil and gas. I've seen a lot more companies prioritizing health and safety and other best practices in their operations. And I've seen a number of local companies partnering with more experienced international companies in the hope of servicing and supplying the oil and gas sector in Guyana. Guyana is a small country, as I've said before, and when things are happening, we tend to see them happening. Even though we have our fair share of naysayers and doomsayers who would like to convince the rest of us that this is all one giant scam or hoax, the vast majority of Guyanese are more hopeful today than they have ever been before. And so our country remains open for business, and we welcome all the interest, and we welcome investments. We want your business, but our people have needs, and our needs are our priorities. So we want to work with you, and we want you to work with us. I thank you for your attention.
So I now invite the members of the panel to please come to. While they come up, I wanted to thank our sponsors in supporting this event, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, the law firm of Hugh, Fields and Stovey, and Total Tech Oil Services and Relocating to Guyana for helping us in organizing this event. So now we have our panelists. We will have presentations of or comments of 5 to 7 minutes each. And then we will have a question and answer session. So let's start with Mr. Dennison, who is the Commissioner of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission. Thank you. Yes, I think so. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, all. And this is indeed an honor to be here with my colleagues, to be present in this August Assembly to give this little presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, by way of a brief introduction to the petroleum geology of the offshore Guyana Basin, I'm in a position to share with you that it is generally accepted this basin formation commenced with rifting in the Jurassic period, which resulted in the eventual opening of the North Atlantic and beyond, separating the northeast margin of South America from its opposite in the west coast of Africa. The basinal areas which trend along the coast of Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana were where thick depositional sequences were established in a marine environment during the Jurassic and early Cretaceous. Such diverging continental margins are also referred to as passive margins. This slide illustrates what the intervals of sedimentary deposition consist of. I won't go into it in the interest of time, but just take away that the Cretaceous shales of the world-famous La Luna shales, which is the equivalent of the Kanji Formation in Guyana, is what is considered the proven active source rock. And that is where all of our oil that is being discovered right now can be attributed to. What is represented in the slide make up the lithology of the Guyana Basin as we know it today. The offshore Guyana Basin came to prominence when the USGS made its now famous forecast in 2002 about the Guyana-Suriname Basin being one of the world's underexplored basins with undiscovered reserves of approximately 15.2 billion barrels of oil, etc., etc. At that time, the only concrete indication of petroleum in the Guyana-Suriname Basin was the reserves of approximately 250 million barrels of biodegraded Tambarejo and Saramacco heavy crude. The Takatu Basin was ranked 39 in a similar industry survey. The Takatu Basin occurs, if you may recall, ladies and gentlemen, in the intercontronic lacustrine basin in the south of Guyana, straddling Brazil and Guyana. This is where the company Home Oil of Canada drilled the Carnambo #1 in 1982 into a structure with a normal faulted block juxtaposing reservoir against source rock, an overmature but good source rock. The result was 400 barrels per day on the test of 42 API, low wax, low sulfur crude. Of course, we may all know that that discovery failed to be of commercial interest. Exploration in the Takatu Basin occurred in 2 cycles since by Guyana Hunt Oil Company in 1989 to 93, when a dry hole was drilled at Torrent Sink, and the Apateri K2, drilled by Takatu Oil and Gas in 2010, which was also dry. That was an offset to the discovery well of the Carnambo. The Takatu Basin never really lost its luster for Guyana, even though Brazil has apparently, from all appearances, lost interest. However, the potential in the offshore was mostly of greater standing, perhaps due to the accessibility and the reality of the grander dimensions offered in the offshore. Drilling by CGX in 2000 led to the maritime border row, which ensued, but is now fully resolved. Drilling of the Jaguar #1 by Repsol et al. In 2012, an incredibly hostile well targeting 21,000 feet, which at the time would have been the deepest well in the basin, did encounter and recover crude, but had to be aborted out of safety concerns. These kept Guyana's basin exploration alive. By the time the Jubilee field was discovered in West Africa, and the Zoidas in French Guyana was a discovery, so the anticipation was growing. And finally, the Liza 1 occurred in May 2015 in Guyana. And now, even Liza seems so distant in relative terms with all that has occurred since. To date, ESSO Exploration and Production Guyana Limited and HES and CNOC have made 12 discoveries for a mammoth approximately 5 billion barrels of oil equivalent in reserves, an unprecedented string of discoveries in the deep water environment offshore Guyana. This slide depicts the acreage position of the Guyana Basin. The Takatu Basin to the south and in the hinterland is not shown, but it is unallocated at this time. The yellows is all allocated. All the gray is available. The dark gray is available for allocation at this time. This is still a frontier in its own peculiar way. The ultra-deep water, where there are Anadarko's Roraima block, the Esso and Ratio et al. Kaieteur block, and the unallocated Block C, is still very risky. However, a working petroleum system in the Cretaceous fairway occurring updip mitigates that risk to some degree. The shelfal areas where CGX, Repsol et al., Tullow, Eco-Atlantic et al. Are situated, and indeed, the basin fringe on the offshore coastal area are typical frontier. In these areas, the focus has been on the tertiary, which has not delivered as yet. There is now a greater appetite to pursue the Cretaceous, even with the difficulties encountered at Jaguar. The Kanji source is reliable, reservoir is well established there, and trap and seal are the elements of the petroleum system that have to be carefully resolved. A fair bit of exploration has been accomplished since Liza in 2015, and much work still is planned in the exploration arena going forward. 2D and 3D seismic to be done, wells to be drilled by CGX on the Quarantine block by Repsol, and in the Canuto block, and Tullow with its consortium in the Oreo block, all to be done within the next year's time frame. The development works continuing in ESSO is on target for 2020 for soil as plans for the additional discoveries have to be factored into the entire scheme. So what is the outlook for any who are looking at Guyana? Well, HES Corporation, with 30% share interest in Stabroek Block, has also staked themselves for 15% interest in the Kaieteur Block, in the even more distal setting. Total has staked itself with the Kanji Block, which incidentally is operated by ESSO and has been Atlantic Oil and Gas as partners. There is much room still for joint venture opportunities among the present active licenses. There is much room still for new venture interests in unallocated areas offshore within the shelfal areas. Guyana will soon have to place in the global domain the fiscal regimes to be transitioned to and the kind of contract to be used going forward. It has been spoken to, and it can be expected that future allocations will be by a competitive process, and like most commercial or business arrangements, companies will always be looking for good investment returns. Certainty offers a level of that. At this time, Guyana's oil patch, though emerging, can offer a fair degree of certainty. There is also the risk or reward element that certain aspects of the Guyana oil and gas estate can offer, and for new ventures especially. A dated 2017 Petroleum Economist article in Guyana's New Crude Frontier suggests that even in the current pricing environment for crude, there is still healthy space for fiscal adjustments by Guyana and reward by investment returns to companies. But I submit that that may have assumed the state of play in Stabroek will be the same for other areas. I have since already shared the view that there are parts of the basin that remain very frontier in character. There are those venture businesses that may actually be attracted to those environments. Several different entities have suggested from preliminary models that the government revenues could peak at about 2 billion barrels per year. But that takes into account forecasts for higher oil prices and higher rates of production. More modest and cautious positions are in the vicinity of about 0.5 billion barrels per 0.5 billion US per year. That is substantial revenue, and based on Guyana's own makeup, it is quite a bit for Guyana to leverage against to achieve its development goals and ambitions directly. I am suggesting that indirectly there is quite a bit on the table for business participation for rewards in Guyana. For example, there are formidable assets in Guyana's offshore, with more to come. 3 drill ships, 1 FPSO, deployment vessels, support vessels, etc. This alone is fantastic for outfitting and provisioning services. If it is being done in the Gulf, then extend the reach to Guyana and build that business there. More fundamental, however, are the expanding of opportunities for ventures in Guyana that already exist, but for which internal markets alone are insufficient to be competitive and viable. Where through the international nature of the oil business, Guyana can be fertile for creating nodes and hubs. For example, the agricultural sector, as the Honourable Minister mentioned before, in an environment where food security for Guyana, the Caribbean, and even Latin America could be the driver for investment. Another area is in the provision of power and energy solutions. With a population that will have to grow, more than likely through immigrants to Guyana, expanding communities will require economical solutions for reliable power and energy. For a country with formidable exploitable natural resources for which added value and refining can create an enviable manufacturing and industrial base, power and energy solutions could render feasible large-scale mining operations that may otherwise be not so feasible. This type of investment, ladies and gentlemen, can diversify the natural resources sector. Delivery of social services can be rapidly improved and meet the potential growth in the demand if it is recognized that such services are indeed an integrated partnership between government and private sector. The services could be health, education, municipal transportation, etc. While I'm not recommending that homeland security be privatized, in the environment that oil and gas will foster, it is very important that security, safety, and the general well-being of the citizenry be addressed. There are areas such as in surveillance technology, communication and auxiliary support, as in trainers and/or for special assignments, where there can be a transfer of such businesses to Guyana. It is a known fact, that Guyana is on the world stage already for the role in green development and climate change mitigation as such environmental initiatives. It is my view that for these initiatives to be truly mainstream, they must be self-sustaining. Hence, they must have a business or commercial aspect to them. In the combined health wellness / nutrition / pharmaceutical industry, Guyana could be a strategic location by virtue of its already established sites like Iwakrama for natural laboratories or sustainable harvesting and processing of biodiversity products. I think I may have overstayed my time. I'm sorry. However, this is in trying to highlight how, where, and by what means the valuable find of oil and gas can be a significant transformative event for Guyana through the investment on a worldwide scale in areas where Guyana is ripe or will soon become ripe. Partnerships and collaboration in a respectful environment and for mutual growth, development, and improvement, and taking care not to destabilize our delicate economic, social, and cultural situations being the objective, this new resource for exploitation should bring very good fortunes for Guyana and not become the proverbial grasshopper or perhaps the cliched resource curse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we'll have Sean Herrera from Schlumberger.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the Baker Institute for inviting me to be part of this panel. I promise my remarks are going to be shorter because I think my role is a lot easier. Really, I think just to convince you that everything that my Guyanese colleagues, esteemed Guyanese colleagues, are telling you is in fact true. From the point of view of an active and ongoing investor in Guyana, as Schlumberger presently is. So Schlumberger has been intimately involved in Guyana's rejuvenation of exploration efforts kind of since 2012, with a couple other wells that were drilled prior to the 3 years prior to the Liza-1 discovery. And as Schlumberger, our policy has always been, as affectionately we say it internally, that Schlumberger goes where the bit goes. So once it was determined that Liza-1 is a commercial discovery, which took 5 minutes at the rig site, and that the development was going to be fast-tracked, and this was going to ensue and quickly become into a fairly sizable development with other discoveries that followed soon after. In December 2017, we turned the sod on a very sizable investment and a big play within Guyana as Schlumberger. And so I think from, I guess one of the reasons I was invited to be part of this panel is to give some perspective from a service company or a foreign investor in this case for doing business in Guyana. Because as I mentioned, what we've undertaken there is sizable, all right? Even in Schlumberger terms, and we've been involved in some big projects globally, of course. So I think from an investment perspective, I think we'll all agree that that the factors that encourage investment in any new territory are fairly universal and global, right? And so from our perspective, I mean, I kind of prepared a slide, but I had some technical issues, so I'll just list what we see those as in no particular order. So I would say open, transparent regulatory framework and permitting process, tax and or duty concessions and holidays, access to a skilled and educated workforce, free movement of capital and human resources, at least in initial phases, no restrictions on foreign property ownership, a friendly banking environment, a stable political environment, and personal and asset safety and security being assured. So in our 2.5 odd years of making significant investment and still quite a bit to come within the next 2 to 3 years as we get set up in what we think will be our ultimate look and feel within Guyana, I'm happy to confirm that the Guyanese government and the people have got those above things right. And and essentially, I mean, I would say that from our perspective and in our experience, we don't see any reasons why these barriers are all but absent. And I will endorse everything that my esteemed colleagues are telling you about doing business in Guyana. I'm happy to take questions specifically on what some of the challenges that we may have experienced as a service company, foreign investor in Guyana, and how we overcame them. But those challenges were very, very few, to be fair. And so I will join my colleagues in encouraging you guys to bring your expertise and your resources and your investment into Guyana. I promise you it will bear fruit. Thank you.
Now we have Jamie McInerney from FTI Consulting.
Good morning. Thank you, Francisco. Jamie McInerney from FTI Consulting. Thank you to the Baker Institute and the sponsors who helped put this together. I think it's a valuable session. I'm glad everyone was able to make it. You may be asking yourself what Jamie McInerney from FTI Consulting knows about Guyana. For one thing, my family comes from a small country subject to the winds of history and at times overshadowed by its neighbors. That country is Ireland. So I embrace my Guyana brethren in that way. But more to the point, our company has been interested in Guyana for a while, and I think one of the things I can offer here is a sort of a little bit more detailed overview of what some of the development scenarios look like for Guyana. One that the companies involved in the Stabroek block have already spoken about publicly is that over the Liza 1 phase, which should be about 120,000 barrels a day by the time it ramps up next year, and Liza phase 2, which could quickly follow, Guyana could be producing around 350, 360,000 barrels per day. Soon after that, I think the investors in that block have envisioned, additional FSPOs that will, perhaps as many as 5 that will, rapidly bring Guyana up the production level. I think levels that have been talked about here today are, almost 1 billion barrels. Some of the analyst community have doubled down on that number. I think, one that, group that I've recently read is Rystad Energy, which looks at Guyana perhaps producing upwards of 1 billion barrels of oil over the over the by 2030, which would obviously, perhaps have it eclipse Venezuela as its its neighbor, which is, or sorry, 1 million barrels per day, I should say, its neighbor, which is going through a moment of its own troubles. The government revenue that will accrue to the from this development is something that I think a lot of attention has been paid to. But what's important really in the shorter term is the investment opportunity that they're talking about here today. A lot more money will be spent on the development of these resources than in the short term than will eventually be accrued to the government. I think the government has a very interesting plan through the Green State Development Initiative to invest some of this money in different types of energy development in the country, and that's something that they're getting a lot of help with from the international sort of donor and investor community. One of the things that the media is quickly, it's easy for them to write about. The easy narrative for Guyana is that here's a country that's going to accrue a lot of wealth very quickly from resource development, and could easily fall into the resource curse. But as I think we've increasingly seen through the literature and the academic study around resource curse, is that really that is a warning, not a prophecy. And Guyana, from my view, is taking the steps to avoid that curse. And the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation, which was recently advanced, the help and support that they are reaching out for from the World Bank, the IMF, the Commonwealth Organization, are all putting the mechanisms in place for this to be one of, I think, the most successful resource developments in our generation. It's something that our company is honored and happy to be a part of, and I am also honored to be here with the panelists today, and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Now we have the presentation of the Honorable Minister David Patterson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. My name is David Patterson. I'm the Minister of Public Infrastructure in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And I can say that I'm probably the most envied Minister of Public Infrastructure worldwide. Because I have been told and assured by my Minister of Finance that I will have adequate resources to do what is needed. And what is needed in Guyana is a lot. I have a almost blank, plain canvas to start creating a masterpiece, which we do hope that Guyana will become in the future. My ministry, Public Infrastructure, has 4 main sectors, and I'll quickly give you an overview. Is land transportation, land linkage, roads, bridges, etc. There's the aviation sector, self-explanatory, the maritime sector, and another quirk of uniqueness of Guyana has the energy sector, both the renewable and the distributive side of the energy sector. In relation to our land transportation aspirations and dreams, my mandate will be to link the coast. I mean, Guyana, we have a very small population, but we, size-wise, we're probably the same size as IDO, which I think is about 83,000 square miles. So you can understand the challenges that you would have with only 750,000 persons in such a large land mass. And as Minister Gaskin explained, our first people, our indigenous people, they reside in about 216 different remote villages countrywide, and they also have a right and a call to the good life, so we have to link them with the coast where the majority of our activities occur. We're also known as a land of many waters, so I have to bridge several rivers. And that, of course, will open up hundreds of thousands of acres of land for agriculture and other development, because we do see ourselves, I know the gentleman before me mentioned the resource guard, we do see ourselves as being able to be one of the, for our region, the food basket for our region, which is the CARICOM region, because we have a lot of agricultural land and we have very fertile soil, so we will be concentrating in that area. So I have to make it accessible. In the next 5 years, it's anticipated that we will be, the country will be constructing over 1,200 kilometers of new paved roads. For you in America and in Houston, that may seem a small number, but for us in Guyana, that is a large number. That is probably about 50% of our current paved roads status. We will, of course, have to address one of the issues of our capacity to execute such projects. And obviously, I know that our local construction industry is already gearing up by partnering with various firms in and around from various parts of the world in anticipation of what is to come. We also, I'm also minded that the challenges that is currently occurring between the country, the developmental infrastructure needs, and the oil and gas sector. Right now, you know, everyone in Houston would know that the oil and gas sector plays better than government, unfortunately. So we have, we have a challenge retaining our human resources. And obviously, as a government, that is an issue which we would have to address in the upcoming 5 years. I mean, I see the Vice President of the University of Ghana is here. We cannot, previously, we exported it was rated at 85% of our university graduates migrated on graduation. Right now, we cannot sustain the technical, particularly in the engineering and the mechanical engineering fields. There's not enough graduates to support both the oil and gas industry as well as the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. In another forum, I probably would have a discussion with Samaje and the other players about the pilfering of engineers from the government sector. But this is not that occasion. In the aviation sector, the upgrading of our international airport is almost completed. It will be completed in a couple of days. It has lengthened our runway to 10,700 feet, which means it's capable of taking any class commercial airline. That is fortuitous at the moment because the projections for the last 3 years of visitor arrivals have been increasing by double digits. So our next challenge is not the infrastructure to take the aircraft, it's actually to find suitable partners to partner with to increase our airlift. Anyone that has traveled, that has attempted to come to Guyana of recent, you know that there's no direct flight between Houston and Georgetown, and sometimes you have to overnight in strange places where you prefer not to. Obviously, you are absolutely desperate and to get to Guyana, and you want to do so in the shortest possible time. So one of my priorities, and I do hope that I could use this opportunity here to send the signals out, is to increase and to establish air linkage between Houston, the mecca of oil and gas, and the new El Dorado in Guyana. So direct flights would be helpful. So anyone that can make that possible, I'm available for private meetings. And we're also in the process of upgrading our we have two international airports, a second international airport, which is on our border with Brazil. While we do enjoy and we do cherish the relationship that we have with our partners in the north, we also have a long and established relationship with our partners in the South, which is South America. Guyana, being on the northern tip of North America, provides a unique opportunity for them, particularly Brazil, which is a very large country, it's landlocked in the northern section of Brazil, to use Guyana as a jumping off point to get to the north. Obviously, other than that, they would have to travel up to come down. So we are in the process of upgrading another one of our airports to a regional international airport that is in Letem. In 2015, when I assumed office, we looked at the constraints in the aviation sector. At that time, for those of you in the aviation sector, we were only 40% compliant with ICAO compliancy regulations. I'm pleased to say that we're officially at 66% compliance, which is above the global average. Global average for ICAO compliance is 60%. And unofficially, we're waiting for an audit now. We're at 80%. So we've invested a lot of money in bringing our regulatory systems up to standard, primarily knowing that oil and gas is offshore, the helicopters and the search and rescue and those things like that will play an important part. So we have done a lot of work in that, so I'm happy to report that on that sector. Quickly, the maritime sector, of course, land of many waters, as I mentioned. I mean, there's several interests in shore bases. The constraint obviously would not be waterways. We do have a lot of waterways. Obviously, the constraint will be the infrastructure to support these shore bases, and we are looking at that. At the moment, we have to transport our cargo and people. It will be a large area, to our remote areas. We're looking at the establishment of a port authority to overlook all of these, and obviously, we are, and I will be receiving a final report on the construction of a deepwater harbor on the end of this month, I think the 22nd, and we're obviously looking into partners with that. I'm very, very minded that all of this buzz, Mr. Moderator, is only for one operator. Exxon is the only operator that has made a discovery as yet. And obviously, we believe where there's smoke, there's fire. So we do believe that there will be several other discoveries. And so we have to plan to ensure that we have the capacity to take all the other operators. And at a discovery rate of 82%, which is what I think it's 12 out of 14 wells that were sunk by Exxon was a discovery. We do anticipate the other operators will have a similar high rate of success. So we are preparing for that. And finally, on the energy sector within my ministry, His Excellency, the President of Guyana, has given me an extremely ambitious goal, and he said resource permitting, and that is that we should be 100% renewable by 2025. I said to him, sir, I'll do my best, but that's a tall order. But we are working towards it to at least, because in 2015 when my government took office, we had zero input in renewable energies. Guyana is blessed with 87 potential hydro sites with a overall anticipated output of 8,000 megawatts. We have the opportunity to be a net exporter of electricity to energy-hungry Brazil. They've actually signed the MOU with us saying that you bring it, we'll take it. So obviously, my job is to find ways to carry it to them. With the advent of oil and gas, the gas portion as well, we are in advanced discussions about transitioning from where we are now, which is 100% fossil fuel, use the natural gas as clean fuel while we upgrade to renewable energies. So that is in the pipeline, no pun intended, for us to get completed. And we do have some challenges. we do have some challenges. Our transmission and distribution network is aged, and the expansion over the years has been rapid, and we've not kept pace with that. So while we have several options, I mean, hydro, solar, natural gas now for the generating side, I have to address the transmission and distribution woes. And we are addressing it at the moment, and we do see a light at the end of the tunnel. And we have several off-grid areas, as I mentioned before, and Minister Gaskin mentioned before, but I wouldn't go into that. But there are great opportunities in the solar, wind, biomass sphere in the country. So I thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to enhancing this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Before moving on to open up the mic for question and answers, I have a few questions to start with for our panelists. First, I wanted to ask Mr. Dennison about what are the plans in terms of the new types of contracts, the way that they will be assigned in the future. Would you be using, bidding rounds, or what type of mechanism, and what could we expect on that front in the future?
Okay, thank you. The Department of Energy is looking again, because there's been some work done using Chatham House and the Commonwealth Secretariat and other advisors on how we can improve the contract arrangements that we have. The template, as I mentioned, will be out at some stage, but I recognize that there will be some consideration for a competitive arrangement that will treat for the different domains that we have been we've recognized for exploration. The template that we've used really never recognized that, even though it was necessary. So whether you were in the Takatu or ultra deep water, the template that we've used had a one-size-fits-all. So we recognize that that would be something that has to be addressed. I'm not quite sure that exclusively we will remain in a strict production sharing format. That is something on the discussion, and at the broader and policy level, I figure that that will be dealt with. But I do recognize that there would also have to be some kind of hybrid arrangement that may be involved in how we deal with the fiscal issues. A lot of what will come out in the new template will have consideration for how the restructuring or the reorganization of the legislation is put in place, because right now the template mirrors very closely the current act and regulations, and that, as open and good as it has been for us, we recognize now that it doesn't go far enough and it isn't robust enough. So we may see that our new contracts will have less of the talk, because most of the talk will be coming in the form of the legislation, and that removes a level of complexity away from the agreements. With respect to how we're going to go about dealing with future allocations, I think it's in the public domain already that a competitive process, more than likely bid rounds, is going to be employed, and that will give an open and transparent arrangement for those who are interested in getting involved.
Thank you. Sean, I wanted to ask you about the challenges of operating in a frontier environment like this is for a firm like Schlumberger, in terms of human resources, the infrastructure. We had Minister Patterson tell us about the future plans for developing the infrastructure needed for oil development and other development, and also the issue of human resources that he mentioned as it's a scarce resource. And I wonder also what's the role to play of the diaspora of Guyanese, that maybe some of them, I don't know, are employed in the oil sector elsewhere, and nearby you have Trinidad and Tobago that has a developed gas industry. So
I'm glad you started with an easy question. So I guess if you rewind the clock to how the Schlumberger brothers started the company, going and doing business in a frontier environment is kind of the what the whole company was founded on. So it's something that that's in our DNA. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I mean, once we get a start or realize that there is potential for any kind of a development project to take place, we are the first people there generally, right? And we pride ourselves with that. And there are particular challenges with that, yes. But as I said, I mean, this is something we've been doing, and we've grown accustomed to it. Guyana is not unique in that those challenges are there to be there to be faced. And the biggest one that we see in every one of these is the access to competent and educated people. And I'm happy to say that obviously the Guyanese people were not exposed to an oil and gas industry before this, so they don't have necessarily the precise and tailored skills that we would look for. But what they do have is a fantastic attitude and a keenness to learn and to take on advice from companies like Schlumberger, who have obviously been doing this for a while. So our experience in terms of human capital, and the general resource of it has been very positive. I don't recall any particular poaching that we may have done from Mr. Gaskins.
We'll speak.
But no. So we had a lot of discussion this morning, and Professor Griffith outlined very nicely what some of their plans for the university are going forward, and that is one of the main sources of talent that we would seek as Schlumberger. And we also recognize that we have to play our part in helping develop that, as we discussed this morning. And Professor made a reference to a ceremony that's going to take place imminently with a service company in the room that is I guess putting our money where our mouth is in terms of that. And so we will be making a sizable contribution to the petroleum sciences, at least initially. Many other initiatives will follow, because yes, I mean, we know that it makes good business sense to hire locals where we can, and I think Minister Gaskin may have said it. And why would we not? If that resource is available, why would we not? It makes good business sense, and for goodness sake, it's the right thing to do. So we recognize that there's some gaps there, and we are playing our part to fill those. It's not going to be an overnight solution, but we have to start somewhere. I was expecting a question around what kind of challenges we faced. And to be quite frank, and this is absolutely not to be pandering to my colleagues, but it has been a very, very, I would say, smooth road by and large. A lot of the challenges that we face have been more or less internal in terms of how we want to get things set up, to make the best use of the capital, the resources, and just the way that we want to design our presence in Guyana. And one of the challenges, admittedly, that we have faced, and I wouldn't necessarily put it as a barrier to investment by any means, is the massive ramp up in just importation of goods and product. And that the Ministry of Finance, the Customs and Excise divisions have been overwhelmed. But to their credit, they have put some things in place that, from a Trinidadian experience, which I'm from, when we heard of some of the initiatives that they're embarking on, I'm expecting this to be a couple of year thing, And to our extreme surprise and distinct pleasure, a lot of those things are in place within a few months and are already starting to bear fruit. So even though those were challenges, they continue to be challenges because the oil and gas industry is a 24/7 operation. Many things that we need to get brought into the country have to be done at short notice, and we're already seeing fairly substantial improvement in a very short space of time. So even though that may have been one of our more significant challenges, we are estimating that in the near future, it probably won't be. It won't be any different to any other place that's fairly friendly in terms of customs and excise processing. So, like I said, our experience has been overall very, very positive. There are challenges, no doubt, but nothing that we have not faced in the past, and a lot less than we face in other places.
By the way, I also welcome the idea of a direct flight from Houston to Georgetown.
I'm in Trinidad, so we have several direct flights.
But for us here in Houston, I hope that our friends in United, I have plenty of miles to spend there. So what about Sean, about the potential infrastructure, the issues? At this point, are there significant constraints in terms of airports, ports, or whatever that?
Significant constraints, no. I think it was obvious that that this was recognized as as part of what needed to be put in place very quickly once the operator decided, Exxon decided that they're going to move to development phase. There were some things that had to be put in place very quickly, and in the absence of those things being put in place, yes, there would have been significant issues with infrastructure, particularly ports and dockside to handle the kind of product importation that I was mentioning. So there's no secret that the Gisby shore base has been established. That's been a major conduit for a lot of the product and equipment and just resources in general that we have to bring into the country. Let's utilize that. Fortunately, the way that we have, actually not fortunately, by design, the way that we have tried to establish our footprint was to minimize the traffic, well, the impact on the I guess already strained infrastructure, the road infrastructure I'm referring to. So where we have set up immediately next door to the Guyana shore base, we're putting systems in place where literally all of our traffic that needs to go from our operation out to the rigs via the Gisby shore base will not touch the roadwork. Okay. So yes, the roadwork is the road network is in need of upgrade, and I'm sure it will happen with the promise of the finance ministers, making the resources available soon to you. But as I say, we don't rely on it too much by design, and yes, and I would endorse, because I'm selfish, I'm in Trinidad, but yeah, we have a lot of colleagues that find it painful, obviously, to move between Guyana and Houston, and so we do look forward to some development on some kind of an air bridge improvement there.
Thank you. Jamie, and maybe Minister Patterson also, or any on the panel might want to talk about this particular sort of issue. The development of the oil sector, we have seen in many places that the potential, the geological potential of some countries is not developed as fully as it could have been because of what we sometimes call above ground risks and things that happen, like political changes, policy changes, lack of contract stability, a variety of lack of consensus on the way to develop the oil sector. And then, of course, we also have the challenges that have to do with the management of oil wealth that sometimes has either derailed even the development of the sector itself, because the population of the country does not see oil as a benefiting the people. Sometimes even in this case, most of the development is offshore, but sometimes it's the communities that are particularly involved in the oil sector itself. And so I wonder what do you see as the potential challenges in this area? We know that there are some groups in Guyana that complain about the contracts. We also know that there will be elections in Guyana soon. And so what are the potential challenges for Guyana to actually develop the oil sector and then to materialize that oil wealth into actual development for the people of Guyana?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly it's honest to say that Guyana is not without its fair share of risks and challenges. One thing that I'm struck by is, if you read the local media in Guyana, you get a picture painted of vast problems and challenges, and it is I would just say sort of a very pessimistic view that when you actually meet Guyanese and you go to Guyana and you speak to the foreign ministers or the ministers assembled here today, you realize it's very different than some of the things you read about. Certainly there are challenges. though, I mean, I'm struck by the fact that, you know, Guyana, a country that you know, had a desire to attract foreign investment, put in place a policy, a contract that was able to attract, you know, some of the largest energy companies in the world to invest there, discover oil from a basin which had not been, you know, previously known, and it's that sort of policy, you know, foresight that I think the country is continuing as it moves towards development and management of the resources. I mentioned from the podium that the folks in Guyana are certainly tapping into the expertise and advice of the international donor community. I think that's critical. I know that I've met and spoke to some of those folks, and they will tell you that in a lot of places their advice is sort of, you know, they get the report and it's kind of puts on the shelf and it collects dust. But in Guyana, you actually see these things, you know, becoming part of the legislation, and the Guyanese, you know, really seeking input and partnership with those organizations. So, you know, I think that portends positive outcomes. The Sovereign Wealth Fund is certainly, you know, one of those types of vehicles that I know had a lot of input from international advisors and is probably, you know, a better piece of legislation because of it. I'll open it up. I don't want, you know, you all could probably tell me just as well what you're doing right.
If I may just add to that, and the ministers, I'm sure, are here to give support to this. Strong government principles, that will transcend anything. Strong government principles. And those principles must prevail so that transparency is key, and that can be determined with good, robust legislation that is being worked on. And once that is in place, in my mind, that will bring the stability in the day-to-day context of operations and for the long term. And that will also bring the predictability for the investors that we would want to seek to have in place.
Yes, thank you. Good morning again. I just want to add to what my colleagues have been saying. Obviously, we, on the discovery of oil, I mean, we as a government embarked on a series of fact-finding missions. I mean, we partnered with various non-governmental and governmental and state actors. And we've done several things, as you mentioned. I mean, our natural resource fund, obviously it's the Sovereign Wealth Fund, but we call it Natural Resource Fund, encompasses our natural resources. I mean, people should note how Guyana was in the extractive industries for over a century or longer. We produced a couple of years ago 700,000 tons of gold. So we know. Right? So we're not actually starting from scratch. We've heard of the lessons. I mean, we've been sitting around. Persons have come in. They've told us of the pitfalls that can happen. So we're very cognizant of that. But that is coupled with the needs of the people. They have high expectations as well. Bit of background on Guyana. The famed city of El Dorado was supposed to be somewhere in Guyana. You know, I mean, we're still looking for it. But we haven't found it. But
maybe you found it.
Yes. Well, no. There you go. You know. So the expectations of our people are paramount. I mean, so they expect that the oil revenues from the oil will go towards their benefit. So we've been crafting policies to ensure, one, it goes towards their benefit, as well as for generational development today for future generators can also benefit. So while I heard that the pace between that we're ramping up for production is unprecedented, we've taken steps to ensure that, that we don't overheat as a country, and we're very, very aware of our absorptive capacity. And so I don't think that you will be seeing me as a Minister of Public Infrastructure building a palace of gold or anything, or any of those, any of those projects. So we're very cognizant of the responsibilities as a government to manage the resources that are coming.
We have here Dr. Griffith, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, and he was telling us before about the interesting plans that they are doing in developing the human resources. I wonder if any of our panelists have comments on the issue of human resources, how to develop that. I don't know if it's in your purview, the infrastructure that has to do with education too, or it's a different ministry. But how do you think that will? I mean, you have a small population, you have a big diaspora, but still, if you add together, it's still not that big population. So, in terms of human resources, in terms of the issues related to potential immigration, how do you see things evolving?
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, you're absolutely right. Our first protocol obviously would be to try and tap into our diaspora members, those that are willing to, and that are able to, should come back and offer us as far as assistance as possible. We are ramping up our educational sector. As the Vice Chancellor said, the advice that I've been, particularly in my ministry, what I have been advising more myself is that let us, do short courses, level courses, 6 months, 3 months courses on relevant parts of the oil and gas sector that you need to do. We will support that to get so that therefore we can at least start bridging that gap. And you also have to remember that we are part of CARICOM, and there is a free movement of people in CARICOM as well, CSME. So that is another revenue pool which we can tap into. And obviously we have, we do have our immigration policies. Certain classes of professionals can come and operate freely in Guyana. Certain classes will have to be registered, but obviously we do recognize that where help is needed, we will be willing to accept. So, but our first protocol obviously is our diaspora members, CARICOM. Well, Sean is from Trinidad, so you can note how we're already open to that. So, yes, and we gladly accept that. So we do see ourselves, in the short term, tapping into those resources until we are able to service the industry as much as we can.
So I can add to that too. So in the panel discussion this morning, somebody raised a very good point about not just it's not only about the degreed university graduates, but we need to be cognizant that there's a level of workforce around the operators that need to be addressed as well. And so for that, I give credit to Total Tech, one of the sponsors of this event, for recognizing that very early on. And they started what they call a Petroleum Academy that we as Schlumberger are very happy to be contributors to. And so they provide, a 12-week course, is it? An 8-week course for 15 to 20 cohorts at a time, providing the basic training that these graduates at the end of these courses are hireable as operators. So they have the basic HSE training, the basic understanding and awareness of what it is like to work on an offshore installation, working with a local company, onshore oil and gas company that they would not have had exposure to otherwise. And then they come into a state that they are hireable. And really, at that point, they just need to be trained in the specific role that they're going to play with, company X, Y, Z that takes them on. So that's been a tremendous resource for us. And in fact, of the 41 Guyanese employees we have on the payroll today in Guyana, 18 have come from, at least 18 have come from that program. Yeah.
Thank you. There's actually one other thing that I've sort of noticed and observed in Guyana, which I think is of note and worth mentioning. There's a Center for Local Business Development, which I believe is a public-private partnership that puts together Guyanese companies, helps them achieve training and certification to meet international standards for oil and gas, and then puts them really directly in touch with the prime contractors that are part of the oil and gas sector, the emerging oil and gas sector. And I think that is something that, if you look at sort of countries that have ramped up quickly in oil and gas, the amount of sort of local content and progress made in terms of incorporating local companies and getting folks into the workforce quickly is really exceptional in Guyana, given just the early stage of where the industry is at right now. It's really, over the long term, it'll certainly pay dividends, but they're putting, the right foot forward very quickly in that respect.
So let me open the floor for questions. There are 2 mics on the sides. Please identify yourself and with a question mark your question, please. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. My name is Joy Salewe. I'm a graduate student here at Rice University. Mr. Patterson, you mentioned in your capacity as the Minister of Public Affairs, you've spoken about developing human capital through education. An often little overlooked area in infrastructure is healthcare. Healthcare is definitely infrastructure, and especially with the anticipated influx of diasporan Guyanese, what opportunities for healthcare investment are you all looking at? And I don't know if it's under your purview or someone else on the panel, but if you can address that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. I mean, it's not under my purview, but I do know that there is a very ambitious plan by the Minister of Public Health taking your particular sector, of course, they're in mind. From our diaspora colleagues, we hear 2 things which they are very concerned about: healthcare and security. And obviously, if we would like our diaspora members and colleagues to return, we have to address that. So I know it's on the front burner. The specifics, I can put you in touch with them, but I know it's on the front burner for both of those areas to make the environment conducive for persons to be back. As enabling, for infrastructure-wise, as an enabling agency for that, I work very closely with Minister Valda Lawrence, who has, I know, plans to open, I think, in the Region 4 and Region 3, 3 new hospitals, large-scale hospitals that do specialty services, and then in the hinterland regions as well. So there are plans. I am not the best person to tell you the specific plans, but I can put you in contact with her.
Thank you.
Yes, Jim Tucker. Minister Patterson, you mentioned that your developments that are planned, it sounds like they're going to be as low impact as possible so that you're not making problems for yourself to be solved years down the road by your children and grandchildren. So I commend you on that, because around the world, a lot of the rapid developments have not always had that in mind and have often had to live with the results. It's gratifying that several of the panelists mentioned the development of increased secondary and university education, because as was mentioned, brain drain can be a problem. So you want to have enough trained people in geoscience and supporting areas so that you can satisfy those indigenously as well as the people who will pursue opportunities elsewhere. So I commend you on the planning that all of you are doing to set yourself up for success. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, wouldn't add more. I mean, you could speak to the vice. We have our vice chancellor of our university here. He wasn't identified. So you on the education front, you can have a quiet meeting with him once he's ready.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Jim Smith. I'm a recently retired professor of oil and gas management from Southern Methodist University. And I know it's early days, but I would ask Mr. Dennison or any of the panel members if there have been any noticeable attempts or approaches, OPEC already courting the potential cooperation or at least friendship of Guyana, and whether there have or not, have there been any ministerial discussions within Guyana of the potential policy decisions that would have to be made whether it's Venezuela becoming a member, Russia being a non-member in cooperation, or being simply independent of this very important world oil exporting body?
Thank you.
Well, I mean, on the OPEC question, I can say it's all there hasn't been any discussion so far. I do think it's a matter being addressed by the Department of Energy. The international body which we've signed on to is EITI. We remember EITI, it's unfortunate. But we would have to have a discussion with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is the lead person in this, and he has cautioned, and I say this, me and my other ministers of during this period when we are the ICJ to leave such comments and such pronunciations to him. So I respect, out of respect for him, I would leave it right there, just saying to others him and his team has been examining these issues.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of the members for really great presentations today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Livingston, I have a question. Do you have any future plans to open up a consul in either Houston or Miami with a business development arm that might be able to assist companies that might wish to invest in the infrastructure of Ghana, or does all of that currently go through Georgetown, or is there any arm here that would be working with people that would be an introductory facet to Ghana, or to Guyana?
Thanks, lovely question. We do have a council in New York, that's our closest council. I mean, I'm sure with the interests being expressed in Houston and maybe in Miami, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs in short order will probably make some recommendations like that. So I do think it's something that will be considered in the future.
Is there business development representatives in this country right now?
So the business development in our New York office.
In your New York office.
And we have
and then we have right here the CEO of Go Invest, who may want to have a few words.
Private sector.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to respond to that question. Fortunately, we do have an honorary consul in the Miami location. I think it's either Miami or Orlando.
Miami.
It's Miami. But there's also a business association that exists in the Texas location. I don't think it's in Houston, but I may be wrong. But as Minister Patterson said, the interest is becoming overwhelming now, and there is the opportunity for us to start looking at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. On that side, yeah.
My name is Stan Reed. I must take the opportunity to thank the panel and the ministers and other officials who have come from Guyana to make their presentations here and to present also a picture of what Guyana is as opposed to perhaps what it is supposed to be by others who don't know. I know quite a bit, but I won't lecture on that subject today. I have heard the Minister Patterson speak about the agricultural sector and the difficulties or the challenges that portend with respect to getting these goods to market and so on and so forth, and making the hinterland, which have some 200 communities, more accessible to things. I'm wondering perhaps if there's any consideration of the utilization of rail as one aspect in the transportation solution in Guyana. That would be my one question. And the other question, I think, is directed to Mr. Dennison, and that would have to do with that likelihood that in the allocation going forward, that there be some consideration given to local participation in the bidding or of some of the blocks, such that in fact they may have an influence in controlling some of the wealth and its dissipation to the Guyanese community. I think there are many other questions, but those two I think would be adequate for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Stan, on Mr. Reid. On rail, that was placed in the mix. I mean, there is a presentation I did yesterday. One of the high priorities of the government is a road link between Brazil, northern Brazil, and the coast of Georgetown. In our feasibility study, we did look at the possibility of rail as well. But one of the challenges when we looked at it is, even though it's cheaper, we were looking at it powered by electrical powered rail or those things like that. And obviously, the challenges we have is our grid. So we're doing it progressively. So our first protocol would be probably getting a road link. For the agriculture purposes, we have, as Stan, you probably noted, it's land of many waters. It's cheaper for us to build, transport them down the river, because we already do that by our waterways. And in the future, we will look at rail. That is primarily between the link between Brazil and Guyana.
Since we are running out of time, why don't we do the following? Let's take all the questions, and please, panelists, write down the ones that you want to answer, and then we do a final. Please, please be brief and to the point in the question.
Okay, thank you very much for a really great panel. My name is Nancy Slatter. I'm from Cabral Energy. I'm a managing partner for Cabral. Really excited about the discovery that was found in Guyana, because this is really close to my heart. When I worked as a geologist for our companies and pointed out this area to be a potential discovery, which they didn't take up. So part of the reason why I started my own company, actually, is the discovery in Guyana as well as the discovery in West Africa. But two questions, and that is, a lot of major companies are going into Guyana because of this discovery by Exxon. What are the opportunities for smaller companies to come in with a slightly different goal and mission that includes the communities, like what Cabral Energy has done in Asia as well as in the United States? Second, what would be the what are the risks that exist right now between the border of Suriname and Guyana, if that still exists, and how is that going to be also pertinent for companies going into Guyana? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Robin Hardy. I'm Guyanese-American businessman. I have a company in Guyana and a company here in Houston. But I have two questions. There is a current shortage of housing in Guyana, and I'm trying to see if the government is addressing that, because there is a current shortage, and because of the potential of immigration to that region, is a country planning to partner with American construction companies to develop housing both on a residential and a commercial level in Guyana? That's the first question. And the other question has to do with the human resource shortage. Are you guys planning to outsource? I know you can take many approaches to taking care of this problem. Are you planning to outsource to talent agencies the acquiring of human resources for both Schlumberger, Exxon, and all the other players in the region?
Thank you. Can you please be brief? We are running out of time.
Sure. My name is Ryan Ramphel, and well, I'm an American, but my entire family is from Guyana, going back 200 years, so Guyana has a near and dear place in my heart. I own property there, I go there often, and my question is more of a request, piggybacking off of the first question that was asked about the healthcare sector. You can't really understate how dire the situation is in Guyana in this regard. I mean, there's a really high maternal mortality rate, high child death rate, growing rates of chronic disease, huge suicide rate, low life expectancy rate in general. So my request is both to the ministers of the government and also to prospective investors in the country that you please, don't put the healthcare aspects of this on the back burner, because we're talking about a population of 750,000 people, and a small investment can go a long way in turning the curve on some of those health outcomes. So that's my request and question.
Yes.
Great panel. My name is Karam Dhillon. I own a small oil and gas company. This question is for Sean. Sean, I just wanted to find out what the water depth is of Liza Field, and what sort of rigs are coming in, and how many rigs, how many more rigs will be coming in. Just the general outlay of how the development is going to go with the rig side of it.
Thank you. Okay.
My name is Jimmy Moore. I was born in Guyana, and I just went back 3 years ago. My question is, who is going to pay for any environmental issues, such as oil spill, oil explosion? Is it Exxon or the government going to pay for that? And my next question is, I was very happy to hear that you are planning to improve and pave the roads in Guyana. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last question.
Charlie Cosad, Total Tech Oilfield Services. Is there a plan for a national data repository, seismic wells production, where the country really controls and has ground truth knowledge of this asset over literally decades, a century?
Okay, thank you. So that when we start with Minister Patterson and then move to this side, any final comments or answers to the questions?
The first question Nancy asks about the companies, I think I'll leave that to Mr. Dennison, but the border dispute between Guyana and Suriname has been, that went to the ICJ and has been determined. So obviously, it is safe and acceptable for companies to explore in that region. I do think that CGX is back there. So that has been resolved about 10 years ago. No further issues has arisen since. For Mr. Hardy, yes, my apologies. The housing shortage in Guyana is a real issue. I think not only in Guyana, I think worldwide housing shortages for various countries. We have a local deficit for our citizens, which we are addressing. Obviously, the oil and gas sector has put a strain on our housing stock. It's no secret in certain areas, particularly where the Gisby, around the location of where the shore base is, prices has quadrupled, land prices has quadrupled. So that is an issue which we are addressing. We look to partner with all companies, not only American companies, one for social housing as a government, and obviously it's the private sector driven housing initiatives are through Go Invest and the Ministry of Business will be supported. But our priority, obviously, as a government would be for the social housing for citizens in the country, and we obviously support any private housing initiatives that may come. Some of the other guys may want to address outsourcing, but I do know that the Department of Energy and as well as the EPA has outsourced certain areas where the international firms. I know for the EPA for the assessment, for the Department of Energy for some of the technical issues. So we do acknowledge that that in areas where we're deficient and we need additional support that we can outsource, and we have done so before. Ryan, yes, we would not understate the need for health care. I would probably dispute some of your statistics, but that's not this is not the place, but it is something that's on our front burner. Environmental issues, Mr. Moore, and well, I read recently, and I actually did speak to the head of EPA yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago, that he has granted, the EPA has approved Exxon Phase 2 development, and in approving it, he indicated that Exxon has provided a bond, and which covers not only them but their partners and subsidiaries, and they have undertaken to, and based on the agreement as well as from him, is that anything over and above the bond, which is theirs costs, will be borne by Exxon. So that is the issue towards the environmental spill. I hope we're talking. I hope that addresses your question. But I note out that here the EPA director did insist on certain conditions that had to be met before he approved the Phase 2 environmental permit. Those have been met, and I'm confident that he would have made the right decision. The other questions I do think other persons can answer.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say that the questions about housing and healthcare are obviously certainly relevant. Those are ones that I think, you know, an influx of capital can be helpful in solving. American capital, foreign capital, you know, development banks, all of those folks are taking a renewed interest in Guyana, and I think we'll start to address some of those sort of long-term problems. And then, of course, that would be sort of the short-term bridge to, you know, a potential future where the government is, you know, an enhanced revenue source where it can take on a lot of these challenges directly with the funds. The only other thing I would say and really applaud the government, which the minister acknowledged, was that, you know, on certain things, there is not the local expertise in this field, and they have done a marvelous job of reaching out and bringing in help where they need it to keep, you know, things moving. Obviously, one of the things that can happen in oil and gas is that, you know, things get slowed down because of, regulatory delay, and that's not something that has occurred in Guyana. And I think that is something that makes the investment environment increasingly attractive for both the current players there and all future ones.
And just before you start, Sean, just for Mr. Hardy, I detect that you may have an interest in the housing. One and only issue we would probably say to anybody, potential investors in the housing sector, is that we don't, as a government, as in the policy, would like to have established any exclusive housing areas. You know what I mean? That the expats are here and they're cut off from the rest of the Guyanese populace. We do think that we're friendly enough to be, so you can live and play around. And we can do that, and that's part of the whole social integration. So anybody who's investing in Guyana, we wouldn't obviously, we tried that in the 50s and 60s and didn't work well. So we do hope so that any housing development will be part and parcel and open to all Guyanese, not only expats. Thank you.
Okay, so there's one question directed at me. Unfortunately, as a service company representative, I don't think I'm at liberty to go into those details. And there are certain, I know, representatives of Exxon and other keen operators here in the audience. I'm sure I could provide you more details. What I can say, I guess the water depth question I can answer. It's roughly 2,000 meters. And in terms of activity, I can tell you, Guyana will be at least as busy this year as it was last year. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Just a question to my friend there on the local participation. Traditionally, Guyana has not typically made any exclusion as to who are the big players and who are the small players. The more important thing is to match the risks with the players. So if your capacity and capability doesn't match where you're planning to go, naturally your selection will be one that is a foregone conclusion if there are competitive arrangements in place. So I would like to think that, and of course too, certain plays and opportunities that are for the small players will not be attractive to the bigger players. So you have that kind of balancing act. But typically we don't, or we haven't made any exclusion between the small. We've had promoters, carpetbaggers, who've all had their role in our exploration experience. So we haven't done that.
Well, thank you very much all for coming, and thank you to our Guyanese friends for coming to this delegation. Thanks all.
Yeah, thank you.